This is my narrative to The Secret Lives of Sergeant John Wilson by Lois, Simmie. Beginning of the book, while still living in Scotland, Jack and his brother Alex ruined their family grocery business by stealing money from Alex's wife's family and Polly's family. They took £200 in order to keep their family business going, and as a result, Jack and Polly's marriage was almost ruined. This could very well be the reason that Jack decides to move to Canada, and as it turns out, he does move to Canada, specifically Saskatoon, to start over, and he says to provide for Polly and the children by getting a better job than he had working at the grocery store with his brother. It is at this point that Jack moves to Saskatoon and becomes an RCMP officer. After getting the new job, he is transferred out to Blaine Lake, where he meets the Pattersons and becomes close friends with their family. Shortly after, he becomes ill, and while he is ill, Jesse cares for him, and they form quite a strong bond. When he first moved away from Scotland to Canada, Jack would write Polly and the children quite often, but after a while the letters became fewer and fewer. Now, after hearing no word from Jack in quite some time, Polly decides to go to Canada to join him. She leaves her friends and family and her 2 children behind to go and find her husband in Canada. Polly and Jack are reunited in Saskatoon and decide to move there from Regina, where Jack was living before. He is still delaying his and Jesse's marriage, as they have become quite close over the past few years, until he figures out what to do with Polly. Trusting in Jack completely, Polly agrees to move to Saskatoon from Regina with him. Now, one day, as they are out driving in the countryside, he pulls over in a culvert and decides to go out and shoot some geese, he says. Polly gets out and goes with him. But while they are there, Jack turns and pulls the trigger on her. He has murdered his wife. Panic sets in on Jack, as it all happened so quickly, and he decides to bury the body right where the murder took place, in the culvert. He leaves the scene of the crime under severe stress, and on the way he decides to turn back and go back the direction he came. However, it is very dark and he is not thinking clearly. He crashes his car in the exact culvert he buried Polly in. Later that morning, farmers nearby that he has gone to ask for help assist in removing the car for him. The very next day, Jack and Jesse finally get married. It is a dream for Jesse to marry Wilson, and shortly after, he is moved to Vancouver for duty. This is very good for him since he can escape Saskatchewan and also his guilt. It has been a long time since Elizabeth Craig, Polly's sister, has heard any word from her since her letters in Regina, describing the apartment she and Jack were living in. As of this, Elizabeth Craig writes the letter to the Superintendent Rutledge that helps initiate the investigation into Polly's disappearance. Superintendent Rutledge acts immediately upon receiving Elizabeth Craig's letter, and Sergeants Darling and Drysdale are put in charge of the investigation into Polly's whereabouts and begin asking questions of Wilson's friends, co-workers, acquaintances, and neighbors. Having tailed Jack Wilson for some time and gained information from the co-workers and acquaintances of Jack Wilson, Drysdale and Darling arrest him and begin questioning him about Polly's whereabouts. Their questioning methods are almost torture to Wilson since they use Jesse as bait. Once the body is found in the culvert, Jack Wilson's life is as good as over. The trial for Jack Wilson has now begun, and the witnesses from the car scene, as well as neighbors of Jack and Polly, testify against Wilson, and he is found guilty of his wife's murder. 77 days later, Jack Wilson is hanged, and Polly's body is given a proper burial. This novel truly shows that crime does not pay. These are what I think are the main 12 events to The Secret Lives of Sergeant John Wilson by Lois, Simmie.